is there anything else about rebranding that is coming to your mind? Is there a fifth step that we need to know? Let us know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that back up. It's such an important point to humanize yourself, right? And even today, if I don't change the name of my podcast, but I change the cover art, I'm doing a post about the cover art changing. What do y'all think? Or more realistic, what I do is I say, here's 4 options. Which one should we do? Right? Like, just a great way to make any little change even is so valuable. I mean, going back in the announcement, one thing I didn't mention is the last episode when it was creating a brand, the very last one before the shift was introducing it. So it didn't come as a total shock. There was like a 2-week break. It was like, hey, in 2 weeks, the show is changing. This is what it's going to be called. This is what I'm doing. And here's why. And so I explained it. I explained it on social media, explained it to my email list, everywhere I possibly could. I got it out there. The next thing is that it's going to be really hard to get 100% right, even if you do all the strategy. So it's to sit back and monitor, right? Like, where is the friction? Where does it still not feel aligned? What's going on? Do I need to make small tweaks, right? The podcast on podcasting, does it need to be podcasting on podcast? No, obviously. But like, you need to think, like, did I make any small things that need to change that you don't necessarily need to announce? You've got a few weeks while people are learning it to quickly make little adjustments and things like that along the way. I've never hit anything exactly right. I've made those little tweaks along the way in real time. But again, you don't want to, like, let's set it for a year and see what happens. Just be willing to make small adjustments along the way once you launch it, like ready, aim, fire, and then just keep on firing. Like, what else can we do? What else needs to happen here, right? And then after that, it's really, again, just look for any sort of misalignment. Anything that keeps on coming as a question is typically, in my mind, a little bit of a flag, like when people ask. And going back to my holistic thing here, like the entire rebrand we've done, Pod Pros for a while was even we called it like our parent company. We kind of did what Meta does with Facebook and all their other apps, or Alphabet does with Google and all their other apps, right? I was like, oh, we can do something like that. It caused so much confusion. Our goal right now that we're focused on in this year is to make Podmatch our only website, one login, one website that has everything on it, not Pod Pros, Podcast Lottery, Podcast SOP, Pod Talks. Like, we literally had like 9 different things, and it caused so much confusion. Even in person, just 6 months ago as an event, people were like, hey, I have a question. Do you own this? What is it? Why does it not over here? Right. And so I'm always looking for those things. So the last phase, I'd say, is just to continue to monitor and look around for what else are people saying. Can I make those adjustments, or does that need to be another major tweak or something that I do? And so for me, I am fully focused on bringing everything into the Podmatch name aside from the podcast. And there's SEO reasons for that, and some things that are just better to leave those two things separate. They go together, but they are a little bit separate. So we've got creating a brand. We've got Podcasting Made Simple and we've got Podmatch. And those are our only 2 things. And we want people to know these 2 things go together, so they both mention each other. Beyond that, we won't have anything else in our ecosystem, even though those 2 things serve in many ways. So again, the whole idea is, can I get my mind wrapped around this whole thing? And if I can other people as well, or are they still struggling?
Yeah. I almost heard our listener say SEO reasons. As you're like, there's SEO reasons. And the listener's like, give me some insight. What does he mean? Would you mind sharing like 1 or 2 reasons why this change and how you're doing it benefits search engine optimization?
Sure. I'll give you 2 things here. The first one is why the podcast has a different name than the website. I met with some SEO experts, and they basically explained that if your podcast and website have the exact same titles, then often it's going to cause search engines to compete for which one should be higher ranked, but neither will ever hit the highest rank because now there's 2. And so if you can get, let's say it this way, if you have one brand, but it's a podcast and a website, the maximum you can get combined is 100. So they could both be at 50%. Or if you just have one, then they could both hit 100% with different names. You just don't want the name to be exactly the same. Even if you just add one word, it's fine. But a lot of people are like, call your podcast Podmatch. And I now realize people are like, that's a really bad idea. You're always going to hurt Podmatch's ranks because it's always going to be competing with the podcast. You don't want them to compete. So I just went with a totally different name that, again, was a bit descriptive of what we do within Podmatch. And so that's kind of like that first one. It's a little hack that I learned from a number of SEO people that are really good. On the other side, having all these different websites, I'm working on their individual authority. So I'm doing blogs for each of them. I'm doing this for each of them, right? Like all these different things. Like I'm working hard to get them recognized, talked about. And here's the more brands you have, the harder it is to get any traction, right?
Yeah.
So what I decided to do, I'm like, well, wait, let's try this. So we put the blog as the first thing we moved into Podmatch. So the Podmatch now has a blog, and immediately all the posts that were on our other websites all started ranking way higher, way faster. I mean, it was like 2 weeks and these things are hitting like top search results for searches we wanted to be part of. Previously, we were like grinding, trying to get people to link to them and share them. We don't even ask anymore. It's just happening by itself. And that was immediate, like, oh man, like if everything's in this domain, it's going to grow a lot faster because now we're telling people to talk about one thing, not 10 things that we do. Again, you're limiting yourself as competition. You're bringing it all just into your own brand. And those two things alone, I think, make it worth it.
So cool. Thank you for sharing.